there's a topic here that I just find this fascinating. This is where politics, policy, and science, and really sociology and anthropology all intersect. So my question for this hour is, are we still practicing human sacrifice? Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. I tell you two stories, okay? So get ready for A and B, and then I'm going to merge A and B together. Here's A. The richest 1% of men in the United States, the richest 1%, that's people earning over $300,000 a year, the richest 1% of men in the United States now live about 15 years longer than the bottom 1%. So this is the difference between being born in Germany, that would be the richest 1%. The lifespan for the richest 1% is about the same as the average lifespan in Germany, because Germany has a national health insurance program, has high wages, there's very little poverty, because it's a social welfare state, it's a democratic socialist state. And on the other hand, the bottom 1% in the United States, they have a life expectancy comparable to that of citizens of Rwanda, not including the year of the genocide, but just, Rwanda. And this gap has just exploded since 2000, just in the last 16 years. Okay, that's data point A. Here's data point B. And that's, by the way, there's an article about this in The Atlantic right now titled "Why the Poor Die Young." Massive study of health and income found that smoking, obesity, and exercise are the most important determinants of longevity. Poor neighborhoods score worse than all of them. What's going on? But, net, if you're poor in this country, you live 15 years shorter lifespan than if you're wealthy in this country. And we're not even talking about billionaire wealthy. We're just talking about, $300,000 a year, which is a hell of a lot of money. But we're talking about $300,000 a year wealthy. Not, Koch brothers probably make $300,000 a minute. So that's story one. Story two, this was in the Washington Post. Sarah Kaplan wrote this. And it's titled, the headline is "The Darker Link," in quotes, "between ancient human sacrifice and our modern world." And she starts out the article talking about how in Japan it was said that sacrificing a woman at a rushing river would placate the spirit who lived there, allowing for the construction of bridges and safe passage of boats. In Greek mythology, the warrior king Agamemnon decides to kill his own daughter in exchange for a favorable wind on the way to Troy. The Egyptians buried their pharaohs with dozens of servants. Bodies found entombed in bogs across Europe may have been slain as gifts for higher powers. The great civilizations of Mesoamerica killed people, smashed food, and sank treasure to pay their debts to the gods. So the question that these cultural anthropologists were trying to figure out is why human sacrifice, and what does human sacrifice do to societies? And so they did what's called a phylogenetic analysis. Phyla is, this is the way that you organize things, the way that you sort things, the way that you determine things. Phylogenetic analysis is used to plot family trees, for example. They examined 93 different cultures, from very egalitarian communities like the Isneg in the Philippines. These are, nobody's rich, nobody's poor. These are sort of like the old Native American communities, to the large societies of the Hawaiian Islands, that were home to complex states with the royal families, and had slaves. This is the old Hawaiian things. And, where they practiced human sacrifice. And what they found was really astonishing. They found that 65% of these highly stratified societies, where there's a big difference between rich and poor, 65% of them practiced human sacrifice, which was extremely uncommon among the egalitarian societies. Fewer than a quarter of them practiced human sacrifice. So it's like more than 2 to 1, almost 3 to 1. You're almost 300% more likely, or say 250% more likely, in a highly stratified society, in a society where you've got rich at the top and poor at the bottom, to practice human sacrifice compared with a society where there basically aren't any people who are obscenely rich and there aren't any people who are in extreme poverty. Everybody's kind of in the middle. These egalitarian societies, they tend not to practice human sacrifice. So what the hell's going on with this? Well, what they found was, and I'll quote from Sarah's article here, ritual killings tended to precede social hierarchies, and once stratification has occurred, they served to reinforce it. It was very difficult for a culture to return to egalitarianism after class differences had set in. This is called the social control hypothesis of human sacrifice. And basically, as Sarah writes in the Washington Post, as Sarah Kaplan writes in today's Washington Post, or actually it was April 5th Washington Post, that ritual killings are a way to terrorize people into submission, allowing the religious and political leaders in most of these cultures, those are the same people, who ordered the killings to consolidate their power unopposed. And this is one of the reasons why the killings were done with spectacle. Like, the Mayans would take the people that they're sacrificing up to the top of the pyramid and rip their hearts out in front of everybody while they're screaming and yelling. The old European societies, they would burn people at the stake, Joan of Arc and whatnot, all this kind of stuff. The ritual human sacrifice done on a big scale, on a way that's very, very visible. It's why the Saudis every Friday have the public beheadings in the square in Jeddah or Riyadh. As lead researcher Joseph Watts said, the terror and spectacle of the act are maximized this way. And he said, people often claim that religion underpins morality. This is one of the scientists, Mr. Watts. But his study illustrates how religious rituals like human sacrifice are often designed to serve someone other than the gods. His quote is, it shows how religion can be exploited by social elites to their own benefit. Okay, so now you've got these two data points. Number one, in the United States, if you are wealthy, you are almost 300% more likely to live an extra 15 years than if you are poor. Because we have a highly stratified society. We have one of the most stratified societies on earth, actually, among developed countries. We're, I think, second or third. I'm pretty sure we're second behind the UK. So now, historically, the way that you maintain that kind of stratification in society is with human sacrifice. So what's our human sacrifice? It's mass incarceration and the death penalty. And we use the death penalty, and we do the death penalty in a very public way. Excuse me. Sneeze there. We do the death penalty in a very public way so as to say, don't mess with us. Don't mess with the system. And our mass incarceration is damn close to the death penalty. It's sacrifice. It's human. When somebody gets, and we've got thousands of people, gets thrown into solitary for years, which is torture, that's human sacrifice. We as a society practice human sacrifice. So one of the things that the study found was once a society that practices human sacrifice becomes highly stratified, it takes a major, major disruption to get them back to egalitarianism. What does this mean for the United States? So back to this human sacrifice thing. I just want to kind of wrap up my thoughts on this, and then I'll pick up your phone calls on the topic. I believe that the United States is practicing human sacrifice, that we have basically from the beginning, and that it has, literally from the beginning. The very early colonists, they tried to enslave Native Americans. They brought indentured servants from Europe with them. Then the slave trade started, and boom, we were off and running. And the sacrificial lambs here, the people that we are human sacrificing, are by and large people of color in this country, mostly African Americans, but basically the more melanin you have in your skin, the more likely you are to be a victim of human sacrifice in the United States. When you've got 1 in 3 African American men in the state of Florida who can't vote because they have been sacrificed basically through the criminal justice system on the altar of capitalism, this is what I'm talking about. Human sacrifice in the death penalty, human sacrifice in a brutal prison system. When Louise and I went to see Michael Moore's new movie, Where to Invade Next, in that movie, and this is not a spoiler, you're still going to love the movie. In fact, you're going to probably want to see the movie even more if I tell you this brief story. In that movie, he goes to Norway And he says, I understand you guys have got this prison thing figured out. Let me see your prisons. And the prisons are like houses. Each prisoner has their own bedroom. It's their own private space. They have a public space. They make their own meals collectively. You know, there's it's like, 10 people living in a house. Each one has their own bedroom. They've got a common area in the center. They've got, a kitchen with knives, meat cleavers. I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, it's all there. There's no prison riots. There's no fights. There's no stabbing. People don't kill each other. Their recidivism rate is very, very low. The maximum sentence in Norway for any crime is 20 years. And I'm watching this, Louise and I are watching this, and then Michael intersperses cuts between the Norwegian prison system and pictures of the American prison system where they're beating people, caging people, electroshocking people, putting people to death in with all this spectacle and drama and all this. And I started crying. It's just, tears running down my face when I realized how brutal our country is compared to a civilized country like Norway. We practice human sacrifice in this country, and we practice it for the same reason that the Mayans did, that the ancient civilization, that the Europeans did 1,000 years ago, not even that long ago, 700 years ago, 600 years ago, for the same reason. But some European countries still are, for the same reason that human sacrifice has been practiced traditionally by highly stratified, hierarchical societies all around the world, and that is to maintain the social control of a very small and very wealthy and very powerful elite. That's why human sacrifice evolved as a cultural meme. It's why human sacrifice became part of our religions. You say, what? Human sacrifice? Remember when God told Abraham to take Isaac up on the mountain and kill him? Sacrifice your son to me? Jesus was a human sacrifice. God said, I want a sacrifice. I want a blood sacrifice. So I will send my own son at you. This is the whole, the Christian mythology, the Jewish mythology, the Islamic mythology, or whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it mythology in a relatively positive way. It's not a hit. These are the stories, are all filled with human sacrifice. Monotheistic religions, in my experience, are the worst at this. But the polytheistic religions as well. Hinduism has human sacrifice in it. You've seen Kali in some images, holding somebody's heart. The old Buddhism, I don't think so. And I think Buddhism is one of the few religions, is probably the only religion that very rarely has anybody ever gone to war in the name of Buddha. In fact, I'm not sure that anybody has ever gone to war in the name of Buddha. There are Buddhists who have gone to war. But on behalf of Buddha? So if we've got a chicken and an egg situation here, human sacrifice leads to stratified societies. But stratified societies are more likely to continue or engage in human sacrifice in order to maintain their stratification, in order to maintain the power of the wealthy and the powerful at the top. So how do you break the cycle? Well, I would suggest to you that you break the cycle by becoming an egalitarian society. The last time we did this was in the 1930s with Franklin Roosevelt. And the sacrificial lambs in the 1930s were not just people of color. It was also white people who were out of work. It was just like basically our economy became a sacrifice zone. And workers were the sacrificial lambs. And workers were wiped out. And you had, in the bonus army, you had veterans as sacrificial lambs. People were dying of starvation. People were dying of hypothermia in the winter. People were dying of heat stroke in the summer. Because of poverty. Our human sacrifices now are elderly people who are having to cut their pills in half or in quarters because they can't afford their medication, or who are having to live on dog food because they can't afford their food. We are still practicing human sacrifice. We also do it by proxy, by the way. You know, this is my old line that I ended my book "What Would Jefferson Do" with, which is, you know, we didn't stop slavery in the United States, which is a form of human sacrifice. We didn't end slavery in the United States. We merely exported it. We now use the products of slave labor, but by and large, they come from other countries. Although our prison industrial complex is doing a fine job of maintaining vestigial slave labor here in the United States. So particularly the for-profit prisons, which is an obscenity, another example of human sacrifice. So back with your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm crazy? And how do you break the cycle? It seems to me like you break the cycle by ending the human sacrifice.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.